me a little bit of the width that's in it. I don't normally use that, but I think I used it on that one, and it felt really good.
Yeah, it's interesting how like people are kind of like, rather than EQing, they're saturating in specific places these days. Like that's like that seems to be what's in vogue, I guess, with with mixers.
Well, you start the further on you get in your career, the less you start to do. So it's like EQ is cool, but with the saturation, I don't know. It adds something to it, and it kind of brings back what we're missing in the digital side of things. I think sometimes too, like that we're used to hearing with the analog stuff, a little bit of those harmonics, and that's why you can add like saturation to the vocals. Sometimes with just you can do it lots of different ways, but it doesn't have to be just like in the top or in the bottom. You can put on like one of these Neve preamps from UAD and drive the input, and then turn the output down and get a little bit more saturation like that. Also, saturation can cause compression style artifacts. So, one of the things like I was talking before, like when you go over 0 VU on analog gear, like it's technically distorting, but it's more saturating at least for I think 3 to 6 dBs. It's more of a saturation. So where we square off on digital reverb, like if maybe your wave was like this, it'll go, So if people that are listening can't see my hands, but instead of being a square. Just because you went in the red, it doesn't square off digitally with analog gear. It rounds out, it smooths out. But how a compressor would smooth things out sometimes. So like it's not necessarily compression, in a traditional sense, but it can contain it a little bit too.
Yeah, it has a similar effect to compression because it brings up the relative volume. There's less dynamics. It's more.
It's not allowing you to go past that point. I guess it's almost like limiting in a sense.
It is. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and like there's more content in there, right? It's more jam-packed, so it's more saturated, right? Like, literally.
But yeah, like things like, especially if you want to saturate space, like the black box.
I love that plugin.
That's a really, really good plugin.
It. Really? I mix into it. Nice. No, it lives on my stereo bus at like not 100%. It's like in parallel, and I recently overdid it with it, and I took it off I messed up a vocal because I was just like, it's the first time it's happened since I've been using it, but it was also because I kind of started with my buddy's like production, and I kind of took it from there rather than kind of building it up from scratch, which I usually do. But yeah, man, that thing just brings so much life. You take it off and the track feels anemic.
Well, it depends. I was using it a lot too, and I was like, oh, I just love it. And then I noticed the low, and so I had it on my mix bus. And I noticed the low end on it was cutting off something. Like it wasn't giving me the bottom that I was looking for, and I turned it off and it was there. Yeah, and I was surprised because usually when it adds those harmonics, you feel like there's more bottom on it. But it was like something to do, like it was a clean track. It was like clean 808 tracks. Yeah, it just was. I was losing something in it. I can't remember if it was that. It might have been that. But I was using the master desk too at one point, and I noticed the master desk does that from BX, which is a really cool plugin. It's a great plugin just to pop on and hear an instant, it's like a betterizer. I don't know how to describe it. Like you pop it on, it just sounds better. But what I noticed is it was doing something to the low end. I don't know if it was doing like a 30 hertz cut or something,
Might have been on that would make sense on the master desk, actually. Right?
I don't know if it's doing that, but I feel like that's what it was doing. And so maybe that wasn't happening with the black box. Maybe I need to go explore the black box again.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just about just using your ears and knowing if it's doing it, if it's improving or not, and just bypassing, unbypassing. That's what I've been doing since that happened. I've been like, okay, bypass, unbypass, put it back on and see if it's making it better or not, and if it's like maybe too much, Like today, I lowered the mix, but I kept it on because I felt like it was still bringing. It was
adding something.
It was adding good things. Yeah.
And I think that's what everything is, especially with these parallel functions. That's really, really awesome with all these plugins. It's like now it's like, okay, I hear what it's doing. Now let's back it off. Like A, B it. Right. Okay, well, I see what I like about it not being on there, but I see what I like about it being on there. Like, where's the middle? Right. And we can do it we don't have to do it in parallel anymore. Because, even with parallel, even with the delay compensation, with parallel, I still hear phasing. So I hardly ever parallel compress anything unless it's within the plugin anymore. Just because I can hear it.
Yeah, it's so funny because I talk to people who say I only ever parallel compress on separate channels. And,
but I'm like, what's the point? Like compared, in theory,
it's the same thing. I mean, it is
right.
Right
now, the gain's going to be different. So you're gonna a lot of times what'll happen is usually the louder one we always perceive as better. within range.
Right.
And so when you are doing that and you're doing in the parallel channels, they're probably hearing it get louder at first.
Right.
And then they're
as you push it in.
Yeah. And they're like, yeah, man, I love parallel compression, just doing it in separate channels where it's at. It's like, no, I actually, when we're using it, within the plugin, it's more true to source. So we're actually hearing what parallel compression is doing as opposed to an increase in volume.
Right. And there's no like delay compensation.
Right. And then, but you don't, issues. But see, you're not, and I know you're not supposed to have phasing when this happened. You know what I mean? Like technically because you're the delay compensation. But I always feel like I can hear some. I mean, there's been times when I can absolutely hear some, but I still feel like there's much less phasing introduced when you're doing it within the plugin on the dry wet.
That does make a lot of sense. Yeah. And like I've spoken with people that like will only ever do the parallel stuff analog, right? Mm-hmm. Like, so that because of the, like to do it like Michael Brower and like not have any phase issues, right? Like, it's interesting. I think I usually use the mix knob on plugin. Like I'll use like the slate distressor on my drum bus and kind of put it at like 10% or something even.
That's a great plugin. I don't use the slate one. I use the UAD one, but the distressor in general, man, it's just the way it handles transients. Sounds
it's a go-to. It's a go-to for drums for me.
Yeah. I don't do a lot of bus work on drums anymore because I overdo it. I get super excited and I'm like, let me try this and this, and it's like it doesn't need that.
But I might be in that phase of my life, to be honest.
That's cool, everybody's there. Yeah, it gets there with it. But I know exactly what you mean. Like even if it's just a little bit, like we're gonna add a little bit, and the distressor does something though. Like the way it makes snare drum sound really is like, it's. I've never put it on and been like, oh, I don't. It didn't add to it,
It brings out the oomph. It totally does. Yeah,
and it's that sound too. It's like you've heard that sound,
It's the sound of drums that you know.
Yeah, that snare, that.
That's true.
But I don't even use compressors too much on drums, if at all, especially with program drums, because if you're using live drums, like that's different. But program drums are already kind of controlled the dynamic because the idea of compressors are to decrease the dynamic range of a signal to where it can be controlled. Right. So with that being said, I'm looking to increase sometimes the dynamic range, not necessarily between the signal, but maybe between the transient and the sustain. And so I use transient shapers like Smack Attack from Waves. Mm-hmm. That's probably my go-to drum. I can shape drums however I want with a transient shaper and an EQ.
Yeah, Smack Attack looks like an amazing product. I have to at some point I'll have to like WUP or whatever they call it because I'm like on version 9 of Waves on my like Mojave iMac. So at some point I'm going to upgrade my computer and then I'll have to upgrade my Waves, and then at that point I'll be open to checking out new Waves plugins. But until then I'm no more Waves until
you've got the SPL, the transient shaper. That's a okay one. And then you have the Neutron if you use Isotope products. The Neutron 2, they have a multi-band transient shaper, which is cool.
In the Slate bundle, I really like the Kilohertz transient shaper. I've been able to get great results from that, actually.
Yeah, I got a little irritated with Slate's the
subscription.
Well, I don't mind subscriptions. Even though I realized today, I'm getting charged so much money a month.
I know, it really adds up. They add up fast.
The way they're laid out.
Oh, the VMR.
Yeah, so when most of the time when you use Slate, you have to pull them into this. I guess it's the VMR or whatever where you can
the virtual mix rack.
Yeah, the virtual mix rack. That's exactly what it's called. Mm-hmm. And I just got irritated with that. I'm like, I just want this one, and not that I couldn't just use that one that way, or if I wanted to use that and then do another one, then I'd have to load up another virtual mix rack and do some stuff. And I don't know, man. For some reason, it just bothered me. I wanted to just use the regular plugins. I didn't want to use it in the virtual mix rack.
I get that. Yeah, I totally get that.
It doesn't change anything about the way it sounds, but like, I don't know, man. It just irritates me.
I actually like it because it enables me to sometimes do like 2 to 4 processes in one instance of a plugin.
No, it's great.
But just because I'm already so deep in that ecosystem that it's kind of hard for me to see a way out.
Right.
But like,
well, if that's your workflow, it's your workflow. I mean.
I'll use like their VCA compressor into the distressor or something, or like the distressor into the LA2A, and it's all in the same thing. I don't have to I don't have to load extra plugins. It's just like all in that same little window. Yeah. So for me, it's like a fast workflow thing.
Yeah, I didn't care much for the EQs. I thought the EQs were a little scratchy. I like a smooth, I like the creamy stuff, and like the SSL EQ, I thought the top end was a little brittle in it, and so it's like. Okay, well, if I'm going to pay the subscription, I'm only using... You know what I like to use was the console emulation.
Which
They
emulation?
still have the console emulations.
Oh yeah, that's great.
Where it has like the, they don't have the actual names, but it's like
the SSLE, the SSLG,
and but where you can kind of switch that knob, and that one was cool. I like that one. But
and the Waves has a great one, the NLS. What's it called? The non-linear summing one.
Yeah, the NLS is all right. I use that some. Trying to think. I really just like using the UAD. Some of that UAD stuff sounds good, and the plugin alliance, like the Shadow Hills, like that. That's a cool one. Like you can really hear a difference between the transformers in the nickel, and the steel, and I guess the other one is the neutral.
I'm gonna have to mess with that a bit more.
Yeah, it's a cool one. It's cool. It's for people that are new to it, it's a little intimidating. But it's just like 2 compressors, an opto compressor feeding into a VCA. I usually turn the opto off. Just
twist the knobs until if it sounds good to you.
That's right. Yeah, but make sure that it's like you got to make sure that you're adjusting things on both sides. So you got to have that button pressed. But if you're in stereo, it's going to react up to left. But I think if you're in dual mono, they have to be the same. But running things in dual mono is cool because you're going to get, a potentially wider stereo image.
Yes.
But you may lose some center focus on it.
Yeah, this interview I did with Dr. Ford was really eye-opening for me about like how the reason why he uses mostly dual mono and occasionally regular stereo. And it's like when's the time to use, to use each,
Yeah.
Because you can't.
Whenever it sounds good.
Right, but you can kind of have like people don't see my hands going up and down on either side, but you can kind of have a bit more jiggle, right, when you have the dual mono thing.
Right. Yeah. It just I can only speak on not the science of it, but what my ears hear I feel like it's more free to have separate information on the left and right. Therefore, we perceive more width in it. Because that's all the difference is just like more on one side than the other, and it's coming from that side, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So like if something's panned, it's essentially because it's louder on that side and we're perceiving it as being over there. But when you're doing it in dual mono, then if there is a fluctuation in volume on just the right side, you're going to feel that, and then it's going to feel farther away from the center, and it's going to stand out to you as having more width.
Right. Just like if you go all the way left, all the way right, LCR kind of style stuff, it feels wider.
That's right.
Man, I love it, man. This has been such a great conversation. Before we wrap this call, I do have a couple questions I do want to ask you, more generally speaking, less specific to however you engineer or whatever. But I try to ask everybody a little bit about their creative energies and how they kind of keep themselves motivated. Because, there are days where we're like hyped to get in the studio and work, and there's days where we're a little bit less excited. Do you have any routines, practices, anything that helps you keep, stay in that good zone?
I guess the main thing is like self-care is super important. Exercising. Also, like I need to work early in the day. I don't like to work late at night. I don't like to be up late. Like I said, my goal in all this is to travel around the world with my girl and eat all the foods. And this is a really good way of doing that. So when I do get discouraged, I just think I'm like, okay, this is for Morocco, or here, this is for Bora Bora, or, all those things are all right. This is for Thailand. We're going to do this, I'm going to knock this out and I'm going to be on a beach in Thailand. And that's what kind of does it for me at this point in my life. But when I don't do the self-care stuff, then that's when all the extra kind of the noise gets in. So that helps me eliminate, like I said, the noise, the static in my life, and help, the anxiety, I still, it's under control, but at the same time, it can pop up here or there when I'm not taking care of myself like I should. So the diet and the exercise, taking care of your skin, getting out in the sun, those type of things. And then after that, like the journey, I think is the other thing you can look at too with this is it's not about where you go with it or like what happens from everything. It's like what happens along the way. It's not about the plaques and everything. It's about, the good stories that you have, the friends that you meet. And the more that you stick to this and the more you do what you're supposed to do, the more you're going to have those. The more, the trips to LA, the trips to New York, the crazy, being in a bar in Melrose or being in Times Square coming out of, Quad or what's the other one up there? Whatever the other studio is right next to Quad or used to be Quad. And Penthouse, I think is what it's called. Like those type of situations, like just remember that, like, those are the beauty in this that you're not going to get from